Are you ready to apologise?
No.
Why not?
Because apologise for what?
Because you implied that the Mayor of London is under the control of Islamists, and he isn't, is he?
Well, who's controlling the streets at the moment in London? We see every Wednesday night, it's almost a weekly occurrence now, Parliament Square is taken over by a mob of extremists who are shining disgusting projections onto Big Ben from the river to the sea. We've seen it time and time again now, and it's disgusting, it's hateful, it's inciting hatred. So when I call these people out, remember that the Mayor of London is responsible for the policing of our great city.
It was the kind of political moment that nobody saw coming, a live TV debate.
Sorry, the Mayor of London is under the control of Islamists. That's what you said, and you've said you don't like the way policing is happening on all sorts.
The cameras rolling, the audience watching when suddenly Lee Anderson, known for his no-nonsense style, delivered a blistering attack on Labour that left the studio in stunned silence. This wasn't the usual back and forth that viewers have come to expect from politicians. It wasn't polished spin, carefully rehearsed lines, or vague promises. It was raw, direct, and cutting. Anderson didn't just challenge Labour, he tore into them, exposing weaknesses, calling out hypocrisy, and doing it all with a kind of blunt honesty that either makes you cheer or cringe. Within minutes, clips of the clash began circulating online. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere you looked. People were sharing the moment. Supporters praised him for saying what ordinary people really think, while critics accused him of grandstanding. But whatever side you were on, one thing was clear. Lee Anderson had owned the stage, and Labour had been left scrambling. This was more than just another heated TV debate.
And I expect sensible answers, but all I get is glazed expressions and waffle and from the opposite benches.
Still in the asylum backlog system that we're attempting to deal with.
Laura Kirksmith. Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is claiming credit for an increase in deportations of people who have no right to be in this country. So I want an exact or an approximate figure, please, Mr. Speaker, of how many of these 9,400 people have been sent back since the Labour government come in have actually arrived here on small boats since 2018.
Mr. Speaker, since the party opposite processed virtually nobody who came over on a small boat, they're still in the asylum backlog system that we're attempting to deal with.
It was a moment that crystallized the divide in British politics, a moment when one man's unapologetic straight-talking style brutally exposed Labour's vulnerabilities in front of a national audience. And the shockwaves from that clash are still being felt. To understand why this TV clash hit so hard, we need to take a step back and look at the man behind it. Who exactly is Lee Anderson, and why has he become one of the most talked-about figures in British politics? Anderson's story isn't one of privilege or elite education. He was born and raised in Nottinghamshire, right in the heart of Britain's coal mining country. Like so many of his generation, he started out as a coal miner, working in the pits just as his father had before him. Those working-class roots have always been central to his political identity. He doesn't talk about politics as theory, he talks about it as lived experience. After his time in the mines, Anderson became active in local issues. He wasn't afraid to roll up his sleeves, speak his mind, and fight for what he thought was right. That plain-speaking style quickly made him stand out. Unlike many politicians who seem disconnected from ordinary people, Anderson built his reputation by presenting himself as one of them. Interestingly, his political journey wasn't straightforward. He was once a Labour councillor, but over time, he grew disillusioned with a party he felt no longer represented people like him. He later joined the Conservatives, and it was there that his political career really took off. His defection alone sent ripples through British politics, but it was his sharp tongue and unapologetic approach that made him a national figure. By the time he made it to Parliament, Anderson had already carved out a reputation. Blunt, outspoken, and sometimes controversial. To his critics, he's divisive. To his supporters, he's refreshingly honest. Either way, he's not the kind of man who blends quietly into the background. And on that live TV debate, it was those very qualities that made his clash with Labour so explosive. Lee Anderson has never tried to be the polished, smooth-talking kind of politician. In fact, that's exactly why many people listen to him. He's not afraid to say things in plain, unfiltered language even if it sparks outrage. And that's where the divide begins. Is he a straight talker who tells it like it is, or a provocateur who stirs up controversy on purpose? To his supporters, Anderson is a breath of fresh air in a world full of political jargon and doublespeak. They say he cuts through the nonsense, speaks like ordinary people, and dares to say what many are thinking but few in Westminster would ever admit. In their eyes, he represents authenticity in a system that feels fake. But to his critics, Anderson is reckless. They argue that his blunt words often cross the line, fueling division rather than solving problems. Some accuse him of using outrage as a political weapon, knowing that in today's world, a fiery clip that goes viral can carry more weight than a carefully written policy. This dual perception is exactly why he makes headlines. Every time Anderson speaks, people either cheer or fume, but nobody ignores him.
Demonstrations at the moment. That's a very different thing.
No, it's not. It's not a different thing at all.
But you're saying he is effectively an agent of Islamists.
No, I've not said that.
Well,
I've
he's
not
under
said
the
that.
control of Islamists.
I've not said that. What I'm saying
what would you take
so
away
you're taking away your opinion of what I've said. So this is my opinion of what I said. The message I tried to get across is that the streets in London on certain days of the week are not in control of Mayor Khan. They're in control of the mob, the raging mob.
And in politics, being impossible to ignore is a kind of power all on its own. On that live TV debate, it was Anderson's trademark style that took center stage. He didn't hold back, he didn't sugarcoat, and he didn't care if his words offended. For some, that was the honesty they'd been craving. For others, it was proof that he thrives on provocation. But whichever way you saw it, his attack on Labour carried the force of his personality, and that's what made it unforgettable. To really understand why Lee Anderson's live TV attack hit so hard, we have to look at the political backdrop. Labour wasn't stepping into that debate from a position of strength. They were already under pressure. And when you're on the defensive, even a single blow can land like a knockout punch. That at the time, Labour was facing big questions about its direction. Critics accused the party of being out of touch with ordinary working-class voters, the very people it was founded to represent. Some argued that Labour had become too metropolitan, too focused on London, and too distant from the struggles of towns and communities across the country. On top of that, Labour was still battling internal divisions. Factions inside the party argued over policy, leadership style, and whether Labour should lean left with bold socialist ideas or stay centrist to appeal to middle-ground voters. These cracks weren't always visible on the surface, but they were there. And Anderson knew it. And then there were the promises. Labour had pledged solutions to the cost of living crisis, the NHS backlog, housing shortages, and more. But for many people watching, change felt slow, uncertain, or just like more of the same. Anderson didn't need to invent criticism. He only had to shine a spotlight on frustrations that were already simmering. So, when Labour stepped into that TV debate.
Welcome to Lee Anderson's Real World. I'm Lee Anderson, the Reform UK Member of Parliament for Ashfield, and joining me tonight is a first former Tory Minister, Heather Wheeler, great lady by the way, and he's back, our left in the corner, Andy Twelves, and Andrew. I have a big bone to pick with you. You recently did a op-ed.
They weren't walking in confident and unshakable. They were walking in with baggage, vulnerabilities, and an audience already questioning whether they truly had the answers. And that was the perfect stage for Lee Anderson to unleash the kind of brutal takedown that would dominate headlines. And then it happened. The moment that would set social media alight and dominate the news cycle. The cameras were rolling, the debate was heated, and Lee Anderson decided it was time to go in hard. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. From the very start, his tone was sharp, his words direct. He called out Labour's record, accusing them of failing the very people they claimed to represent. He slammed their promises as empty, their policies as weak, and their leaders as out-of-touch career politicians. At one point, Anderson turned to the Labour representative on the panel and delivered a line that instantly went viral, so blunt, so cutting, that the audience audibly gasped. It wasn't just an attack, it was a demolition. He tore through their arguments one by one, hammering home the message that Labour no longer understood working-class Britain. The power of the moment wasn't just in what he said, but how he said it. He spoke with passion, with conviction, and with the kind of plain-speaking force that made it sound less like politics and more like common sense. For viewers at home, it felt less like a debate and more like someone finally saying aloud the frustrations they'd been feeling for years. Anderson wasn't careful. He wasn't polished. He didn't hold back for fear of offending, and that's exactly why his words landed like a bombshell. In just a few minutes, he managed to do what many of Labour's opponents had been trying to do for months. Expose their weaknesses in a way that ordinary people could understand instantly. It was the kind of live TV moment politicians dream of or dread. For Anderson, it was a triumph. For Labour, it was a disaster.
It's not the same as saying that Sadiq Khan is under the control of Islamists.
So who's controlling the streets on a Wednesday night?
Who is controlling Sadiq Khan?
Yeah.
Not Islamists. I think surely it would be better for reversing yourself out of a hole, but also calming down tensions.
I'm not in a hole.
Just to acknowledge that that's not true.
It's the media that are trying to paint this picture that I'm some sort of Islamophobe or racist, and I'm not. I admit that my language might have been a little bit clumsy at times. The fact that listen. The point I was trying to get across is that Mayor Khan has not got control of the streets of London.
Well, then maybe you should just
The studio wasn't ready for it. When Lee Anderson unleashed his brutal takedown, the air seemed to shift. You could almost feel the tension through the television screen. The Labour representative, caught off guard, tried to push back. But the problem was, Anderson had gone straight for the jugular. His attack wasn't vague, it was specific, sharp, and perfectly timed. Every counter-argument sounded weaker in comparison. Every attempt to regain control came across as defensive. Instead of looking strong, Labour looked rattled. The audience in the studio mirrored the drama. Some sat in stunned silence. Others nodded along with Anderson, and a few even clapped at his blunt delivery. That kind of reaction is rare in live political debates. It showed just how much his words had cut through. Even the presenter, usually quick to step in and smooth things over, seemed taken aback. For a few moments, the debate wasn't balanced, it was one-sided, with Anderson firmly in control of the stage. And this is what made the moment so powerful. Politics often feels scripted, predictable, like every line has been rehearsed 100 times. But here, live on air, was a raw, unscripted clash that felt real. Anderson didn't just win the argument, he commanded the room. By the time the segment wrapped up, it was clear that Labour hadn't just faced tough criticism, they had been outclassed in the moment. And the silence that followed Anderson's most brutal line wasn't just awkward, it was the sound of defeat settling in. It didn't take long. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, clips of Lee Anderson's explosive takedown were everywhere. Social media lit up like wildfire, Twitter feeds filled with snippets of his bluntest lines. Facebook timelines shared the clip thousands of times, and YouTube uploads of the exchange began racking up views by the tens of thousands. The headlines followed fast. Newspapers branded it a car crash moment for Labour and hailed Anderson as the man who had cut through the spin and said what people were really thinking. Some outlets praised his honesty, others criticized his aggression, but either way, they couldn't ignore him. What made it even more powerful was the contrast. While Labour's representative looked flustered and defensive in the clips, Anderson appeared calm, forceful, and utterly unapologetic. That visual contrast became the story. One man in control, the other scrambling to recover. Pundits on late-night shows replayed the moment over and over, dissecting every line. Was it brilliant political strategy or reckless provocation? The debate itself almost didn't matter because the clip had already taken on a life of its own. And in today's world, virality is currency. A single sharp exchange on live TV can do more for a politician's profile than weeks of carefully planned campaigning. By the next morning, Anderson's name was trending. His quotes were plastered across news sites, and Labour was on the back foot. Struggling to shake off the humiliation, what had started as just another debate had turned into a media storm, and Lee Anderson was right at the center of it. For Labour, the aftermath of Lee Anderson's brutal takedown was nothing short of damage control. The clip was everywhere, the headlines were relentless, and the party had to respond quickly. But instead of coming across as confident, their response only deepened the sense that they had been caught off guard. The first instinct was defensiveness. Labour figures rushed to the airwaves. Dismissing Anderson's comments as cheap shots and attention-seeking politics, they insisted he was more interested in playing to the cameras and offering real solutions. On paper, it sounded like a reasonable push, but in reality it only reinforced the perception that they were rattled. Some Labour MPs tried to laugh it off, suggesting Anderson's words didn't deserve to be taken seriously. Yet the problem was clear. People were taking them seriously. The viral clips showed an authenticity that Labour's carefully rehearsed responses couldn't match. For every attempt to downplay his remarks, Anderson's words just kept echoing louder online. Behind the scenes, reports suggested frustration within the party. Some MPs felt the representative on the panel had been unprepared for Anderson's style of attack. Others worried that Labour's messaging wasn't sharp enough, leaving them vulnerable to exactly this kind of ambush. In short, the clash had exposed not just a weakness in the moment, but a deeper problem in Labour's ability to defend itself under pressure. Instead of turning the page, Labour's response seemed to extend the story. They were reacting to Anderson, not setting the agenda themselves. And in politics, once you're in that position, you've already lost control of the narrative. While Labour scrambled to contain the fallout, something far more significant was happening outside the Westminster bubble. Ordinary people, the viewers at home, the ones who tuned in without party loyalty or political spin, were reacting. And for many, Lee Anderson's words struck a chord. Phone-ins on radio stations were buzzing the next morning. Callers praised Anderson for saying it like it is and for speaking in a way that cut through the usual political waffle. On social media, countless comments echoed the same sentiment, that finally, someone on live television had said what ordinary voters had been feeling for years. Anderson's blunt, working-class style made him relatable in a way that polished politicians often aren't. He wasn't quoting statistics or hiding behind vague promises. He was talking about real-life struggles in language people understood. That authenticity, whether you loved it or hated it, resonated. Of course, not everyone was impressed. Critics argued that his words were divisive, even reckless. Some warned that his confrontational style might win headlines but not long-term solutions. Yet even many of those critics admitted one thing: Anderson had tapped into something powerful. He had managed to capture the raw frustration of voters who feel ignored by the political class. And in politics, connecting with the public is everything. Policies can be debated, promises can be questioned, but when people feel like you get them, that's when momentum builds. On that night, Lee Anderson didn't just win a TV clash, he won something far more valuable, the ear of the public. So, what does all of this really mean? Was it just one fiery TV moment, or does it have deeper political consequences for both Labour and the Conservatives? For Labour, the clash was a warning sign. If a single debate can expose their weaknesses so brutally, how will they stand up in the heat of a full election campaign? Anderson's attack showed that Labour's messaging is still vulnerable, that when confronted with blunt, relatable criticism, their polished answers can fall flat. It highlighted a disconnect that many voters already feel, and Labour will have to work hard to close that gap before the next ballot box showdown. For the Conservatives, meanwhile, this was a moment of opportunity. Anderson's performance gave them a weapon, a figure who can connect with ordinary voters in a way that many of his colleagues struggle to. He embodies a style of politics that's raw, unapologetic, and powerful on television. For a party trying to rebuild after setbacks, that kind of voice is invaluable. But there's also a bigger picture here about British politics as a whole. Anderson's rise, and the reaction to his TV demolition of Labour, shows how much people crave authenticity. Love him or hate him, he speaks in a way that cuts through the noise, and that's why his words matter. It's a reminder that politics isn't just about policies, it's about connection, about who can make people feel heard. In the end, one thing is certain, that live TV clash will be remembered as a defining moment. It wasn't just a debate, it was a glimpse into the future of British politics. A future where plain-speaking, unpolished voices may matter more than carefully crafted speeches. So now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Lee Anderson's brutal attack has exposed Labour's biggest weakness, or was it just a flashy moment that will soon be forgotten? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this debate is far from over.